So welcome everybody. My name is Samantha and I work on the events team here at Algonquin College. Thank you so much for joining us this afternoon. Grab a nice warm beverage. I've got my coffee and a little blanket to get all cozy. We are going to talk about astrology and the moon with Britten LaRue. I am so excited. I've been looking forward to this. So folks, before I hand over the floor to Britten, I'm just going to go over a couple of housekeeping points. So the AC Hub is where I work, and we host a variety of different workshops and events throughout the school year. So please, if you're interested, check out our events calendar, which we'll post in the chat view now. If you need closed captioning, you can press the CC icon along the bottom of your Zoom toolbar. We will have a Q&A session towards the end of the event today, like the last 10 to 15 minutes. So please hold your questions until then. If you have a question during the Q&A session, please raise your virtual hand, to ask your question aloud, or you can type your question into the chat and I can read it out loud to Britten from there. And this event is being recorded and will be available to watch on the AC Hub on-demand website in the coming days. Okay, folks, so I now have the pleasure of introducing you to the wonderful Miss Britten LaRue. And Britten, thank you so much for being here today, and you can take it away.
Okay, thank you. Thank you for having me, talking about my favorite topics, astrology and the moon. So I'm Britten LaRue. I'm an astrologer. I'm primarily these days an astrology teacher and mentor to baby astrologers, as I once was. I write workbooks on sign wisdom and on the moon, which I'll show you probably in a minute. And I have a Patreon community where I give weekly updates and I have live meetups. And oh, thank you. And I'm posting on Instagram. Well, I live on Instagram daily. So if you enjoy my voice and you're resonating with the way I talk about astrology, I'd love to connect with you over on Instagram or in my Patreon space. So astrology, let's, before we get into it, just take a minute or two to arrive in the space. This is an exercise that I like to do like all day long for myself, but also before I do anything in Zoom, which is to basically just kind of center to being here and separating from whatever we were all just doing. So especially if you're on Zoom a lot, like sometimes we need to kind of reset, or at least I do. So if you are in a place where you can close your eyes, that'd be great. If you want to keep them open, that's fine too. But just for a minute, let's just take a moment and you can take a few deep breaths and just like come back to your body. Just feel yourself arriving into your body, drawing awareness to your skin, to your bones, maybe running your hands up and down your legs or your belly or your arms. Just be like, hey, body. Yes. We can get so disembodied staring at screens all the time. Just noticing your body, taking some deep breaths to exhale out whatever you've been carrying today. It's really fun to be with astrology, and it's nice to create some spaciousness for it. So just taking some nice deep breaths to exhale out any tension in your body. Noticing the contact points between you and the floor. Noticing how you're held by the ground beneath you. And seeing those contact points as like apertures, which you can open and dilate and invite in more connection to the ground beneath you. Settling into yourself, you can ask from within, is there any energy that's not mine right now that I'm carrying? Like somebody else's, or the energy of like an email or the energy of a conversation or a task or something that you're carrying a lot right now. And everything that's really not you. You can imagine bringing it all into a clump and bundling it up. Maybe put it in a little blanket and visualize sending all of it out of the room that you're in, outside the building that you're in, off the property that you're on, and maybe even out of the county where you are, maybe sending it out into the universe. And just letting yourself come back home to yourself so that you can be here more full of yourself and your own energy. Excited to talk about astrology. So thank you for having me. Something that is important to say at the beginning of talking about astrology is that astrology is, it can be very heady, like intellectual, mathematical, analytical, which is super fun. And also it's very intuitive, it's creative, it's mysterious. And so it's always nice to check in before listening to people talking about astrology, to allow yourself to listen from different parts of yourself and notice, like, if you start to get overly analytical, which usually shows up by feeling frustrated at trying to process so much information. If you start to feel overly analytical, kind of allow yourself to tune back over to your intuitive side, which will trust that you will receive what you're here to receive from this talk. And you don't need to process all of it today, all at once. When you trust in your intuition, you know that you will get what you need from anything in your life, and you don't need to understand everything that I say. You're just here to receive what you came here for. And only you can know that, because it will just come floating up to you because you intuitively call it to you. That's the way I like to talk about learning astrology. So what I would like to ask then at the beginning is that you trust that. And then I want to tune into, like, everybody's comfort level with the language of astrology. So on a scale of 1 to 3, I'd love to know in the chat, if you're 1, that means like you're really new to astrology. Maybe you just found out that there's more than your sun sign. Maybe you didn't even know that till I said that. And like, or maybe you know some things about your chart, but you really don't know what they mean. And you're here because something's telling you to get curious about astrology. That's a 1. A 2 is that a 2 would be that you have comfort with the signs, like maybe you follow astrologers, you're like into astrology. You maybe don't know about the planets as much, or like how to like read charts, but there's this comfort level. You definitely are beyond beginner. And then 3 would be you are actively studying astrology, like you're taking classes potentially or reading books about astrology. You feel like you know your chart. You could like maybe start reading other people's charts. So it seems like there's a mix of 1, 2, and 3. Okay. Thank you. I will speak so that everybody receives. But I'm happy to see some 3s here too. I found that I tend to work with all levels. In a month's time, will have clients and work with people who are brand new. But mostly these days, I'm working with people who want to be in the 3 zone and who want to become astrologers and like write about astrology and become paid to be astrologers. So I really love working with all 3. Okay, Thank you. And saying hello, of course, to the people that are listening in future and who are also at their 1, 2, or 3. All right, so let's speak a little bit. It's a very general topic, astrology and moon magic. So let's just begin with like, what is astrology a little bit here? Because that can open up some nice things to think about. And again, we're going to have questions at the end. So if you feel a zing of like something you want to pause on and talk about, write it down so that you can remember it at the end. And then, but if you have a question about something that you want me to articulate, because maybe you didn't understand the way I described it, put it in the chat so that I can pause and clarify what I'm saying. So at a basic level, we can think about astrology as like a system since prehistory, ancient systems that track patterns of the relationship between things that are going on in the sky with the celestial bodies and how those celestial bodies seem to relate to certain principles or themes or invitations or energetics that show up in pretty dependable ways in human life here on the planet Earth. So it's a sky-based study, but it comes from Earth people. And so there's a lot about the planet Earth in the language of astrology that we look at. I also like to think about astrology as a language. I mean, it's a language that you study like you would study other languages. So this is why it can be frustrating at the beginning when you're learning in year 1, because there's just like a lot of words, you know, and sometimes it can just feel like overwhelming. Like, how am I going to keep track of all that? Like, how do I put the sign word and the planet word and the house word and a chart all together? How do I mix planets and what those means? Like, it can feel overwhelming when you're beginning because you're learning a language. And so I like to joke about how when I was learning French, I used to watch Friends dubbed in French because it really helped me because I understood what was going on, and maybe I didn't pick up on everything that they said, but it helped me get slang faster, and it kind of immersed me in the language. And so if you're new and sometimes it's frustrating, I feel like think about it as like, I'm trying to immerse myself and I'm not going to understand it all. I'm just going to trust that like learning any language, it's just going to kind of make its way in. And I just focus on learning the parts of speech and then listening to people talk at more advanced levels. And it will begin to like coalesce, and you'll start to realize that what was once difficult or oblique starts to feel like it's coming to you, which is really, really fun. It's really, really fun as you start to feel, as you know, when you're at like the 2 to 3 levels, it's really, really fun when you start to realize like that you're having your own interpretations now, and like you're seeing it everywhere you go, and you're feeling it from other people, just like I'm feeling Saturn right now, because like each of the planets has like a vibe, and then you start to feel the vibes in everywhere in your life, and you have words for them. So I think about how Marie Montessori said that, and I know this because when my daughter went to a Montessori school, a thing doesn't exist until you give it a name. And so what's really rewarding and fun about astrology is that it puts these words on things that you already knew intuitively, that you could like feel them, but you just maybe didn't have a word for it that was as fun as these words that come from mythology. These words that are old, and they're keywords that carry these like aggregated resonances that are fascinating, and you feel them in your body. And so it feels like it has this kind of like truth resonance, even though it's kind of hard to explain why, because it carries also that mystery that I was talking about. So astrology is a language. It's not a belief system, you know, it's not a belief system. So it's really important to say up front, like it's, is it real? Should we believe in it? I don't know. Don't believe in anything, I would say. My favorite astrologer, Caroline Casey, says, believe nothing, explore possibilities. So it's really just like, I always say the question is not, is astrology real? The question is it helpful? Because if it's helping you to connect with, say, a planet or a sign or something that you learn about in your chart, then that's awesome. And it doesn't really have to conflict with the belief system unless the other belief system like insists that you not let it in, right? So it's not a belief system. I like to say in my workbooks that astrology is a technology. I find that really interesting as a term because it emphasizes astrology as a tool, and we use tools, like tools are like helpful things in our lives, like any tool. Think of a tool. Astrology is a tool. It's a technology of what? I say it's a technology of attunement. So if you think about like, what is attunement? It's like tuning in. We're tuning in to something. And so like my job as an astrologer, and I write a weekly write-up for my Patreon on Mondays, is I'm like using the tool to tune in to like, this is what this week's energy may bring. And this is how we can prepare ourselves. This is how we can be with it. This is how we can support ourselves. These may be the types of boundaries we need with people. This is a more external week, or this is a more internal week. Like there are ways to attune to the technology to give us some kind of energetic information that we can then make helpful to our lives. Because for me, it's like a waste of time if it's not helpful or relevant to like our actual lived experience out in the world, trying to do stuff and have goals and love people and other beings and survive / thrive. So there's all kinds of things we can do with this technology. Saying that you are in the field of astrology is like saying you're in the field of music, in the sense of like, that means a lot of things. It means a lot of things. And people have a lot of different opinions about what music is or what astrology is. So there's many ways to be engaged with the field. And there's many ways to be an astrologer. There's many ways to talk about astrology. So, for me, what I'm interested in as an astrologer is working with astrology as a tool for personal transformation, for self-care, for reprogramming from unhelpful conditioning, and for getting inspired to embody new ways of being that we thought were heretofore impossible for us. So that's what I'm really interested in. And I look to the planets and the signs that are related to them to give me the language to help people feel more inspired, trust in transformation, and figure out like which are the teachers they want to work with to do whatever kind of personal alchemy they want in their lives. Because each of the planets is a different kind of teacher. And I'll speak more about that now. So the signs are like adjectives. They're like kind of like ways that we show up, ways that we embody qualities. The planets are the players that impart upon the signs their qualities. So as you know, if you've gotten deeper in astrology, the planets are really where it's at when you want to go to the next level beyond the signs, because it's the planets that give the signs their interests. The planets each speak to a set of human capacities that we can all relate to. Like every planet, we all know, they're like all in us. We see them everywhere we go. These are what we call archetypal principles, archetypal qualities that as human beings, we just get, and people got 1,000 years ago, and people will continue getting these. Now, we alter how we write about them because the way we write and talk about them is from human beings, and human beings are related to like the historical moment that they're in, and they carry the biases of their culture, right? So we talk about, we're reprogramming astrology right now as human beings who are like, I don't really know that I like the way this is written. Does this really, is this really what the planet was teaching us, or is this what someone 100,000, 2,000 years ago wanted to say it meant? So it's an active field, just like any field in academia, where there's revisioning and there's rewriting that happens as people want to expand the possibilities of what planets and signs mean. So that's interesting to think about. It's not a fixed system that we have to like fully accept. If you don't like the way somebody's talking about astrology because it's like really loaded, say, with a patriarchal lens, then that astrologer is just a voice that's not updating, you know, and you can find astrologers that are interested in updating the language. So we are gathered to talk about astrology and also to talk about the moon. And so I want to switch over to the moon, but at this point, I want to pause on like, how's everybody feeling about that kind of like high level introduction to astrology? Is there anything that you want me to clarify or detangle a bit from what I was just sharing? I know there's thumbs up. Okay, thank you. That was very helpful. Good. It's a large topic. So how do people decide to change the planets? Oh, you mean like how we want to talk about them? Yes. So like, okay, just a simple thing that just popped into my head, like Saturn having to be a man, right? Like Saturn being a he. This is how it's always been discussed, right? And so, but as you get to know the energetics of the planets from being in intimacy with them, living with them every day, feeling like you're in conversation with them, they can expand beyond these categorical identities that they've been given, right? So like, to me, sometimes Saturn feels like father man, and sometimes Saturn feels like old, like wise crone woman. And I'm allowed to have that relationship with Saturn. You know what I mean? So there are ways in which we can, like, it's not like, oh, I ignore everything that was said about Saturn, I'm going to write my own Saturn story. But it's like there's language that humans use that can be limiting, and we have a right to push against that. Good. Will I talk about Mercury retrograde? Yeah, maybe we can talk about that at the end with the questions. I'd be happy to, because it's a big one. Yes. Yes. Okay. Is there anything from what I was just saying? I feel like we're good. If you have another question from that intro part, you can ask it at the end. So let's like dig into the moon a little bit. The moon then is one of the celestial bodies. I'll call the moon a planet, you know, because we speak about the planets and don't often distinguish like astronomically what they are. So the moon is a really important planet in astrology because it's what we call one of the two luminaries. The luminaries are the sun and the moon since the ancients. They're like our eyes, like we see out of our sun self and we see out of our moon self. You know, at full moon, the sun sets and the moon rises and they look like they're the exact same size, which is just sort of like this incredible, like sacred geometry, because obviously they're not the same size, but like, if you put yourself in the place of human beings for the past thousands of years, watching the sun and the moon, watching how they're relating, the sun just comes up and kind of does its thing every day, right? It goes up and then comes down, and the moon being different every day. And like the moon, it's like rising at different times every day. It's different sizes. Sometimes it's waxing, sometimes it's waning, and sometimes you don't see the moon at all, like when it's dark and new. So the moon is a really important part of the chart. It can be a really powerful way to know yourself. And I found from working with clients that getting into their moon can be like a life-changing experience for people. And I'll get into why that might be so here. So I find the moon really fun to talk about because it's so close to us. We can see Venus, we can see Jupiter and Saturn in the sky every night up in Aquarius. It's not that we can't see them, but the moon is just so close, and it's just so visceral, the way that we can bond with it. And I'm sure everyone knows what I mean. There are moments in your life where you might feel like you're bonding with the moon. It's very powerful how it affects us. Like it literally affects us. Our tides, the waters in our bodies are affected by the moon. And so what's cool is that it has this very real, it is a real thing in the sky that we can really bond with, and that really actually literally affects us. And like things in astrology, we can talk about it symbolically, because astrology is a symbolic language. It's a language of symbols. And what's really cool about symbols is that symbols are open and multivalent, meaning they have many meanings. When you say something is a symbol for something, there's no end to what you can say the symbol's about. Once we start talking about what the moon means, we can just keep talking and talking and talking, because we'll just open more doors, and it will lead us into the moon is like this, and the moon is like that, and the moon has these stories, and the moon that connects to these stories. And what's amazing about astrology is that it's like that for everything. You can never know everything about astrology. It's not a possible thing, which is very relaxing to me with my academic background that wants to be an expert, to know that there is no knowing everything. It's fine to say that you don't know everything, because it's impossible. So the moon is both real and it's symbolic. So we can bond with it literally, and we can really get excited about symbolically what it stands for, and let that into our psychic, our emotional, our intellectual experience. So I'll be talking mostly about the moon symbolically, but then also kind of relating it back to, and then you can also go outside and hang out with the real moon, which is so cool. So one of the symbols that the moon is, just from witnessing the moon, if you just take a month and commit every day for this month, I'm committing to looking at what the moon's doing today. I'm going to find it, figure out when it's up. I'm going to notice the phase it's in, and extra points if you have an app or some other way of figuring out what the sign is that the moon is in, because the moon changes signs every 2.5 days as it goes around the sky, and it's changing its phase every single second, in micro ways. We can break down the phases of the moon into 4 or 5 or 8 phases, but the truth is they're still all arbitrary, because the moon is constantly changing every second. So it can be really powerful to just literally commit to watching the moon on a daily basis and checking in with that. And the app that I like to use is called Moon Minder. If you want to try this out, feel free to put in the chat an app that you like for tracking, say, the moon sign and what the moon's up to. Moon Minder also has other astro updates, like Venus moved into Sagittarius, which it did today. So yes, one of those symbols for the moon is simply that it's a symbol for change. The moon is a symbol for change. That like, yes, like we don't have to be the same every day. The moon rules moods. The moon rules moodiness, in the sense of like, I don't have to show up the same for you all the time, you know? Sometimes I'm like this and sometimes I'm like that. And this is not a problem. This is actually modeled for us in nature, you know? Because sometimes the moon is really big and really showing us a lot of it, like wants to be on the center stage. And sometimes the moon wants to be quiet and like not be seen, you know? So for those of us who feel sometimes like there's a problem with our changefulness, or like there's a problem with our moodiness, you know, like the moon can be a powerful model for saying like, that's ridiculous. All there is in life is change. But the moon is inside a structure that's rhythmic. So that's what's cool, is there's a rhythm to it. It's 28 days. It's the same rhythm, but it's a changing rhythm. And so there's a model for like giving containers of rhythm to yourself that allow you to be changing inside of that rhythm, which for me is like very organic and natural. So as you pay more attention to the moon and you're like living with the lunar cycle, which many of you probably have a lunar practice, or like you're very maybe aware of new moons and what phase the moon's in. So you know what I mean, that like with the industrialization of time, with modernization and the development of like clocking in and clocking out, which came with train travel, the modernization and industrialization of time has really cut us off from how our bodies relate to organic time. And for thousands of years, human beings have been tracking organic time with the moon. So working with the moon, or like being connected to lunar time, can actually it can be really radical how amazing it is to bring that kind of like organic flow of like waxing, getting bigger, diminishing, resting, and bringing that to like creative processes, your goals, everything that you're doing can have a lunar cycle. And you get used to it from like literally being with it, and learning how to like just be cool with these processes. And that does mean rest at the end of the phase, giving yourself time to like not do things, you know, just like let the pie rest on the counter, you know, which is not something our culture really encourages. Our culture encourages us to always be in like kind of a waxing mode constantly. So we're all exhausted, you know? So I find working with lunar time to be really restorative and nourishing in ways that are in many ways quite radical. So as you learn about your chart, you can discover like, okay, so what phase was I born in? What sign was I born in? And then if you know your chart, it has 12 houses, which indicate domains of life. And you can find out what house your moon is placed in. That's why you need your exact birth time. You can't know what house it's placed in without your exact birth time. But unless the moon changed signs on the day of your birth, you can figure out your moon signs. If it changed signs on the day of your birth, you'll need to like know morning or evening or something like that to be sure on your moon sign. And since the moon changes signs every 2.5 days, like that, there's a third of a chance you may be one of those people. But if you want to know if you want to look up your chart because you've never done it before, you can go to astro.com. You can go to ChaniNicholas.com. There's lots of places where you can pull up your chart and put in your birth info and find out your moon sign. So that can be really fun if you've never done that. So as an astrologer, then, when I'm talking with someone who has shown me their chart and we're sitting down I just did a moon only reading today. We spent a whole hour on moon. I begin by sharing that in the language of astrology, the moon is our emotional body. The moon is our feeling body. And our emotional feeling body is often a mystery to us. Like, we don't necessarily know what we're feeling all the time. The moon is related to the tides and the ocean and water. So if you think about the ocean, like, you can look at the surface, but there's all kinds of stuff going on underneath the surface. And a lot of that's just in the language of like psychoanalysis. That's the unconscious material. And so when we get into the moon in our chart, what we're doing is we're inclined then to attune, using it as a tool of attunement. We're attuning to making the unconscious conscious. So the moon can be very tender, tender material, because we're talking about our emotions, we're talking about our feelings, and we often kind of operate with daily habits and modes of behavior, patterns. We have these reasons why we do things. We have these needs, we have insecurities, we have these dependencies, and we don't necessarily know where they come from, because in many ways they actually do come from such the past that we don't even really understand where they came from. You know, they may even be pre-memory material. So the moon rules the past. The moon rules how we were parented in many ways, not necessarily the mother, but often the mother in the chart can be any caregiver. The moon relates to what constellated inside of us in our childhood as our set of emotional needs for safety and security and for love and validation. So these are very tender, right? It's like we just want to be loved. We just want to feel safe. We just want to know that we're safe, you know? And as children, we learned like, okay, if I do this and if I do these things, then that will like help me feel safe, you know? And so the moon is this really sweet part of our chart that I personally think that we're always reparenting. So this is where I get into the term emotional reparenting, which may be something you've heard of, maybe not. Reparenting doesn't mean that you're like your parents were bad. It just means that some parts of your child self may have had what we might call severed belonging, or like maybe like just parts of you that maybe didn't feel seen, or like that weren't attuned to by caregivers, or like you just maybe learned like you had to take on a role in order to get what you needed for safety and security. And that part of you, like the idea is always lives inside of you as what we can call your inner child. And so to me, the moon in your chart is your inner child, that as an adult person, it becomes your responsibility to parent. I teach a whole class on this in the summer. And so when I'm sitting with someone, this is why it's a very powerful reading to do a moon reading, because often like what gets spoken is like stuff coming up, like from that ocean place, like the unconscious of like, I didn't even realize that those were my emotional needs, or I didn't even realize that I was doing these things because I wanted to feel safe, you know? So it's very powerful stuff. And because the moon also relates to mystery and intuition, the intuitive body, the intuitive self, it's mysterious why we know things, right? Like it's a lot of times we just know things. There's really no like actual evidence for why they should be true. We just know, you know, I feel it. It's intuitive. The more you learn to caretake your inner child, the more you can trust your intuition. And then the more you trust your intuition and you have like confidence in that intuition and you trust that inner voice that you hear inside of you, then your moon placement begins to really unlock like a superpower that you have inside of you that's like really capable or really intuitive or really good at certain things. And that's part of the sign language of the sign where you have your moon. So like, for example, I'll just give myself as an example, because I think examples are helpful. So in my chart, I have moon in Capricorn. This is actually kind of a tricky place for the moon, because technically we say the moon rules Cancer, meaning the moon governs Cancer and gives Cancer all of its qualities. Cancer is the opposite sign of Capricorn. So my moon is like far away from its home turf. It's like living in the opposite land that it wants to be in, so to speak. Most of my chart has this, like the planets are like opposite where they like to be. I happen to see this as like a really great thing. So it's not good, bad. All astrology is neutral. There's no good, bad. That's a big thing I teach. But my moon self for my emotional needs for safety and security come from like Capricornian place of like, want to focus, want to work hard, want to endure. Capricorn is the mountain goat. Maybe I have some Capricorns in here. Like, you climb the path that's before you. Who sets the path? Father or culture or mother or school or church or something creates a path and is like, just follow that path and everything will be great. And so for moon in Capricorn, it's like, for my emotional need for safety and security, I'm just going to like head down, work, endure. And like Capricorn can get cut off from the rest of the body in order to endure. Just like, don't think about how you feel, just keep working. And so I don't know if this is resonating. Any other moon and caps here? And so I've always been very good at like ignoring hunger signals of like ignoring the part of me that wants to go play or have fun, ignoring the parts of me that's like sad and in pain, because it's just like, as long as I'm like getting my work done and I've got my to-do list and I'm achieving and like everything will be okay. So this was really resonated for me when I first learned my chart, because it's a very different part of my personality than my very Piscean sun self or my Aries rising self. And, but so viscerally true. My moon is at the top of my chart in the 10th house of career and reputation. And it's also about like teachers and elders and institutions. My whole life, I've always been like attached to the teacher. I've been in academia for 20 years. Like, I want to be known for my good work. Like, I have a very visible sun because it was at the top of the sky the moment I was born. So seeing that was really helpful, because it was like, I see that the way I can help my inner child is to help her know that like that validation will ultimately not like bring me real relief. I have to feel like I'm the boss of my own good work. And I have to feel like my dedication and my enduring hard work is satisfying my own authority, because if I'm relying on it externally, I will never be ultimately okay in my body. I'll just constantly feel unsafe. And so that has been my reparenting work, is learning how to self-validate and learning how to become my own boss. And this makes sense if you are higher level in astrology, because Saturn rules Capricorn and Saturn is authority. And so learning how to become my own authority of like, I decide when I work and I decide if I'm worthy of teaching a class or not. And I decide, like I'm going to publish and I don't need some conference to tell me I'm allowed to publish or whatever. Like I've kind of like moved away from the institutions to kind of create my own institutions. And that has been very validating internally for my moon. I'm saying like, I make my own safety out in the world, So that's the work I hold, but everyone's got their own journey with their moon, and it has its phases. you can feel like, you've risen through a cycle of self-healing and growth, and then it falls away, and then like new things come up, and then you work through those. I don't think we're ever really done with our moon. We just get better at self-parenting, and we just get more skilled at finding teachers for self-parenting. And we get more relaxed at trusting the process rather than expecting outcomes and results, because the moon doesn't believe in stuff like that. The moon is a cycle, it's a rhythm. It's not a linear destination. So the moon teaches us about trusting in cycle rather than linearity, because linearity is a myth from culture, So that's one of my favorite things about the moon and talking about the moon. And just again and again, working with people, learning how to work with the real moon and learn the symbolic moon, and how to love yourself in your chart from what you learn there. I see these as having completely life-changing experiences for people, as it's been for me. So, so I didn't get to the moon superpowers for myself then. So my superpower is, I work hard. I have like so much endurance. These books I did last year, during quarantine and stuff, they're gorgeous, with my partner, Angela. She's Libra rising. She's got the artist touch. I just like churned these out. They're big workbooks, back to back to back over like 9 months. And I can do that because I have all this background in writing and academia, and just like I said, I'm going to do it. I'm going to do it. But I did it for me, and I validate my own work, and feel strong in it. It's just such a different feeling than when I was writing for institutions and writing for pleasing my professors. So that's been my journey, which took to, my intimate late 30s before I got into this. So many of you, I don't know what the age spread is here, but I sure would have liked to have had all of this language when I was younger. So I think it's, what are these books about? So each one is about a sign. So there's 12. And then inside it, here's a table of contents. I don't know if you can read it, but there's sections on the basics of the sign. It's a workbook, so you work in it. There's a whole section on, like this is Scorpio. So I have a whole thing on alchemy and underworld journeys, the mythology of Scorpio, Mars and Pluto, whole sections on them. And then I have whole sections on for any tarot lovers, like a whole section on Pluto and the tarot, right? And then spread ideas for working with that. And then at the back, there's lunar rituals. So there's like new moon, full moon rituals for Scorpio season. People love them as like birthday books, but they're really designed for everyone to have all of them to work with when the sun is moving through that sign. But it's written so it swings both ways. But you can get them at my website or at my Etsy, Britten LaRue books. Thank you. Thank you. So I think it would be a great time to take questions. I don't know if you want to chat it or raise your hand.
If you've got a question, folks, feel free to raise your hand, or you can type it into the chat, and try and refrain from asking really specific questions about your certain sign, just because we want to make it really accessible and informative for everybody. So Britten, I've actually got a question really quickly, if you don't mind.
Yeah.
I used to work with kids, and a lot of the time parents would say, oh, we're having a difficult time with their behavior because it's a full moon. And it seemed like a lot of people would associate like bad behavior or negative events happening when there was a full moon. Why do people think that? And what can you say about behavior and full moon?
Well, that's so interesting. the energy feels collectively raised at full moons. There's like more emergency room visits and stuff. People's bodies are different though. So I teach just body listening with the phases with students as they want to learn, how do I want to be with the full moon? Or how do I want to be with like a new moon? Because there really isn't one way. Some people may feel ecstatic about a full moon and want to be social. Historically, this is when people could travel and like gather at nighttime and like get home in the night is during a full moon. It's like, no, historically how you could gather around something that went into the night. But for me, like I find full moons really exhausting and I sort of feel like I can't handle it. So I like to be alone on full moons. And I think that that's fine, right? Like some people feel super energized, they want to like clean their whole house. I feel like in Moon to Moon, I talk about like some basic thematics of each phase, but then I also emphasize like, just listen to yourself though. Feel free to be like, no, that's not how I feel. Because the goal for self-care is, what do I need right now? Like, what do I need right now? And if you know that you have a pattern of hating being with people at a full moon, then it's really great because you can look ahead and be like, oh, that's a full moon. I'm not scheduling that. Like I'm going to stay in that night. And you can do these self-care things. Like I've noticed that I and people in my community tend to be super weepy when the moon is in Cancer. So it's sort of like, okay, if you want to be like super steely and fortified at that interview, or, you know, when you make that presentation, or like when you have that conversation that's going to be difficult, and you notice a pattern, it's all about tracking pattern. If you notice a pattern of like, I tend to be a little bit emotionally destabilized at this phase or this sign, then you can come in and do the self-care, which is moon. Moon is self-care. Take care of yourself and don't schedule those things for when you know that you're really just going to want to be alone and like play music, you know. On social media, there are always, do you think that I answered that fully? Okay. On social media, they're always posting moon rituals. Is it real? Do they work? Again, believe nothing, explore possibilities. Personally, I find the reason rituals work is if you give them a container. A container means that you commit that this is what's happening right now. It's a time and space that you're doing your ritual. This has really powerful effects because we live in such a distracted culture that our consciousness doesn't very often get to experience what it's like when you are like committed, you know, and nothing else is going on. So when you sit down and you say, maybe you've pulled things together and you've created like a sacred space, like you've brought in the energy of something that you find powerful, that relates to something you want. Like maybe if you're doing something around money, like having things related to abundance altogether, or to Venus, having something externalized that you're wanting to grow internally can be very powerful because you're like putting energy in a condensed space and it lives somewhere that you can return to. And creating a container around your time with that energy clues your unconscious and the universe, because as within, so without, that you're serious about this and you do want this. And there's something there that like makes something happen, I found. So I think it's really about the energetics of your commitment that are what create the power around rituals. The words that you say, the herbs or whatever's that you bring, like, I don't know how much that really matters as much as your intention to commit. That's what I found. Does the moon have the energy to charge crystals? I think it's like, if you trust that that can be really powerful, but it's really about experimenting and like, does it feel that it charged the crystals? Because if it feels that it did to you, that's the only thing that matters, you know? If you feel that they carry the moon now, that's the only thing that matters. That's true. I feel that Instagram and other pages online are hard to trust when learning about astrology. Yes, yes, of course. You have to be really discerning, as with all sources. Yeah, if I would love to have everyone follow me on Insta. I'll put it in again. Because I'm really, oh, let's see. I put that into everyone. I'm constantly reposting people's work that I love because I'm really into helping my community get educated on other sources that I think are awesome, that I can tell that the people are integrity, like what they say feels really charged with their own knowing and their own dedication and devotion to this field. And so that would be something that could help you from following me, is if you'll pretty soon realize, like, I have a whole slew of people that I love, and then you can follow them, and then from following them, they'll lead you to other people. So there's like a web of like good information, good ideas, creative suggestions that can flow your way. Oh, thank you, Sue, for putting my links in again. I feel that you are a moon goddess. Oh, thank you. The moon's day is Monday. So every Monday I wake up and I say, like, my thanks to the moon for being there. As I told my client at the end of the meeting today, who is in the thick of reparenting, that the moon can be her parent, you know, like every time you see it, it's like, thank you for being there. You know, the moon is always there, even when we can't see it. And that's like a really beautiful model for like how caregivers, you know, sometimes you lose a caregiver, but they're like still there. I don't know. It's so beautiful. Every time I see the moon, I like to send thank you. Thank you for watching over me, helping me remember who I am, helping me work through all the things that I work through. So thank you.
That was amazing, Britten. Thank you so much. And thank you so much, everyone, for joining us. I had so much fun with you, Britten, and seeing everyone here and engaging was really awesome. So folks, like I said earlier, we have a lot more events coming up in the future. So please check out our events calendar, and please connect with Britten through her social media pages, Instagram, her website, and her podcast, Moon to Moon. Again, Britten, thank you so much for being here. We really appreciate it. And have a great rest of your day, everyone. Thank you so much.
So fun.
Bye.
Bye.